Hi and welcome to Best in Tesla. There has been a seismic shift in the EV landscape, folks. GM's Mary Barra just dropped the bombshell. Yes, it finally happened. Mary Barra admits that Tesla is actually the leader in EVs. What? Have she talked to Biden about this, because he actually believed Mary when she said they were the leader? But what she has been saying and Jim Farley has been saying lately is basically they will not be real competition for Tesla for another decade. As Jim said, they will not have price parities on EVs before next decade, and Mary is saying they will not be profitable on affordable EVs before 2030 or maybe even later. Yes, they are admitting they are not competition to Tesla, not even close. And Jim also explains why it's almost impossible for the old guys to make an over-the-air update. So let's check it all out and let's dive right in. Despite the GM's push to electrify, Barra just revealed they don't expect to turn a profit on their 30,000 to 40,000 EVs until, wait for it, 2030. Or maybe even later, as Mary Barra just said. That's right, folks. GM's affordable EVs, slated for this year, may be the loser leader for nearly a decade. Now you might think, hey, they can cover those losses with their traditional ICE business, right? But here is the cold hard truth. The ICE market is dwindling rapidly. Automakers and analysts have been banking on ICE profits to cover the EV losses, but by 2030 those profits could be a distant memory. So where does that leave someone like GM and his fleet of Equinox and Blazers and Silverado pickup trucks? Well, the more they sell this decade, the more money they lose. But here is the rub. When Tesla starts tuning out millions of $25,000 EVs with 20% margin by 2026, what will this mean for legacy automakers like Ford and GM? Well, it does sound like a recipe for a disaster. I think it will be a bloodbath. When people say Tesla's lead in manufacturing is about 3 to 6 years, I think that is very much underestimating Tesla and very much overestimating the legacy automakers. As we know, Tesla did become profitable in 2020 thanks to the ramp of the Model 3 and Y, but GM will not really be profitable on their EVs before a decade later. And Tesla will even have their next vehicle that could cost Tesla something like $18,000 to produce, ready by 2025 or maybe even next year. So at least 5 years earlier than Mary Barra expect GM could maybe be a little bit profitable on their EVs. Tesla will have an affordable EV for about $25,000 with 20% gross margin on it, something GM might never have. Please let this one sink in. As Jim Farley also said before, he doesn't expect to ever catch up to Tesla in cost of production of EVs. Remember, Ford is aiming for something about 8% of gross margin at some point at the end of this decade. Jim has said he doesn't even think EVs will be on price parity with ICE cars before next decade. So Jim and Mary are basically saying they will never catch up to Tesla in cost. So I would say Tesla's lead in manufacturing is way beyond 10 years compared to someone like GM and Ford, and seems to be widening. But even though Mary is talking about the more affordable EVs, I don't think they will be much more profitable on their big heavy pickup trucks with the much higher sticker price, because of the insanely big batteries they have put in them to get a decent range. Like the Hummer EV that has 200 kWh battery pack. And we know the Ford is losing about $60,000 per EV they sell, and I think the big loser is not the Mach-E, but the F-150 Lightning with its huge 131 kilowatt-hour battery. So if they can even get profitable on the huge electric pickup truck, I don't expect it to be by much. So Jim and Mary are simply saying they will not be competition for Tesla for a decade to come. And just imagine where Tesla will be in a decade. Yeah, they will never catch up and will never be real competition. But it is not just because the lack of profits that GM is hardly making any units of the Lyriq and the Hummer EV, or the lack of pre-orders, as we know the Hummer had more than 65,000 pre-orders. But with the rate GM is producing them right now, it would take them the rest of this century to get through the list. So GM says it is only because of supply issue. But Curry from Monroe & Associate says he had talked to people from General Motors in Detroit that was in the know, and they said it was a software issue, that they are not getting these cars out in high volume, simply because they can't get the software to work. Yes, we kinda heard this before. I made a whole video about this a couple of years ago when Herbert Diess was CEO of Volkswagen, and he was out explaining why it was so difficult for Volkswagen to make good software and why over-the-air update was a nightmare for them. And I think that is exactly what GM is experiencing right now. But now Jim Farley is also out explaining it again. So let's just hear it from him this time.
If I explain to, the listeners how crazy our software system is and why it's so difficult for legacy car companies to get software right, I'll do it very quickly.
Yeah.
So to save probably $500 a vehicle, or let's say 350 quid a vehicle.
Yeah.
We farmed out all the modules that control the vehicles to our suppliers because we could bid them against each other. So Bosch would do the body control module, someone else would do the seat control module, someone else would do the engine control module.
Right.
And we'd have about 150 of these modules of semiconductors all through the car. The problem is the software are all written by, 150 different companies, and they don't talk to each other.
Right.
And so even though it says Ford on the front,
Yeah.
I actually have to go to Bosch to get permission to change their seat control software.
Right.
So
Wow.
even if I had a high-speed modem in the vehicle and I had the ability to write their software, it's actually their IP. And I have 150, we call it the loose confederation of software providers, 150 completely different software, programming languages, all the structure of the software is different. It's millions of code, and we can't even understand it all. So, that's why at Ford, we've decided in the second generation product to completely insource the electrical architecture.
Right.
And to do that, you need to write all the software yourself. But just remember, car companies haven't written software like this.
Yeah.
Ever. They've never written software. So we're literally writing how the vehicle operates, the software to operate the vehicle for the first time ever.
Yeah.
Yes, this is a huge problem, and GM is of course no different than Volkswagen and Ford. And this is why the old guys are having huge problem catching up to Tesla, that makes over-the-air updates seems so simple as we get them all the time. But for the old guys, it is a nightmare, because if they want to change something, they have to get in contact with one of these 150 software companies to get their permission to make the change, and then get them to make the change, and also make sure it doesn't mess up anything else in the software from the other 149 software companies. An almost impossible task, and why, if you have bought an EV from a legacy automakers, you have probably not got many, if any, meaningful over-the-air software updates for your car. And even though Ford is aiming for having all the software in-house in only a couple of years, does not mean it will be so. We can look at Volkswagen to see how they're doing with their in-house software. They spent $6 billion on getting the Carrot software company. So they did actually buy a software company. But even so, they still, to this day, have huge problem with making over-the-air updates to its fleet, and still struggling with software bugs. Even though they promised these features for the ID.3 that was supposed to come out in 2019, but it was delayed because they could not get the software to work properly. So as I said many times before, it is not easy making software, and good software is extremely hard. And you don't become a software company overnight. Even if you buy a whole software company like Volkswagen did, it doesn't mean you will succeed. They have fired Herbert Diess because of the software disaster Carrot has become, and are now seeking help from Chinese software companies as well to help them out to get this up and running. So I am a little skeptic towards Ford's goal of creating a whole new operating system and having all their software being made in-house in only 2 years' time. Because, as Jim said in the interview, they have learned a lot in the last 2 years with the Mark E and the Ford F-150 Lightning. So it's not something Ford has been working on for the last decade. So maybe they have been working on it for 2 to 3 years and hope to get it done by 2025 for their second generation of EVs. But it just seems a bit too fast to be true. And we could see the same thing happen to Ford as we have seen with the Volkswagen Group, who had delayed the Trinity platform from 2026 to 2030 and have delayed many of their upcoming EV models in their other brands because of this software issue. And it is probably what we're seeing happening with GM, that is struggling to get EVs off the production line in high volume. But if Ford can pull this one off, I will be very impressed. But I think it is more likely that they will partner up with someone like Tesla and maybe start licensing software from Tesla instead. As Jim said, they are already today just a badge on the front of the car, but everything inside the car is made by someone else. So why not team up with just one company that can supply all the software and hardware needed instead of 50 different software companies and hundreds of other suppliers for thousands of components in the car, and instead team up with Tesla, that eventually even will be able to give you full self-driving features as well. To me, that just seems like the easy solution, and Ford has just shown us they are not afraid of partnering up with Tesla. So let's see if they can figure out the software themselves, or if they in a couple of years will go to Tesla to get help once again. Yes, the gap between Tesla and the old guys is vast, and the pace of which Tesla is advancing, well, it seems like the legacy automakers may always be one step behind. And thank you for watching. And until next time, take care out there and be nice.